Howdy, all. Well, we have 3 games to look forward to tonight. One rather interesting game last night, but as usual with the Hockey Buzzcast, I wanted to open with something non-hockey related. Saw that Red Sox slugger Pablo Sandoval may be out for the season. I don't know if it's because of excess rotundness or what, but after signing a monster deal last year, he had a pretty bad season and came to spring training morbidly obese. And now it sounds like whatever injury he has, I don't know the specificity of the injury, but he's apparently either going to have surgery or it's not going to allow him to play the rest of the year. Russ, this could be one of the worst contracts in pro sport history because the guy, I mean, he won 2 World Series with the Giants and was an integral part of those 2 championships. And he comes to the Red Sox, he gets the big money, and that player that helped win 2 World Series didn't show up.
True. Of course, I'm going to Google, like, how much did Brian Bosworth make? How much did Ryan Leaf make? Those are pretty awful ones, too, right off the top of my head. But this was awful. Like, you knew there was a tremendous risk when they signed him to this deal, and you knew this is why the Giants didn't want to deal with this, because they could see the writing on the wall. And that doesn't mean next year he doesn't come back and have a chip on his shoulder and slim down and become the player he used to be.
Yeah.
But this is like a throwaway year now. Whether he's hurt or not, it's a throwaway year. And I'm sure the Red Sox didn't anticipate that. And it just shows you when you're a sport that has an embarrassment of riches, a lot of guys are getting contracts that aren't worthy. Well, and he's one of them.
It's not and the funny thing is, it's like I know that the Yankees take the hit for being like the evil empire and the team that throws billions at players. But if you look over like the last 5 or 6 years, the Carl Crawford deal, they found a sucker in the LA Dodgers to trade that ridiculous contract to, and he didn't play well there. They spent big money on Rusney Castillo. I think he was a Cuban expatriate who came over, and he's in AAA. Now, he's young, and maybe he comes around, but, they paid a ton of money for him, and he's not – I mean –
So here's the funny thing. So, wait, what did you say Sandoval is making?
I wasn't sure, but I think it's like 16, 17
Okay. So Bosworth made 11 on his entire contract. That's how the world has changed.
Yeah.
But it was still a bad $11 million spent, because $11 million back then would be probably 16 to 18 million now too. But that was his 10-year contract that was worth that.
No, if memory serves, he was not drafted. Wasn't he wasn't he like
No, he was drafted. I believe he was drafted.
Okay, it was something weird because I don't remember him. I mean, I remember Ryan Leaf was second to Peyton Manning the year that Manning was drafted #1, but for some reason I thought there was some sort of like he was a supplemental pick or something like that. I mean, I'll look at it's not that important, but yeah.
But that's a lot of money, and teams don't like wasting that kind of money. It's a tough thing. I do want to give 1 second of a PSA. You can see my dog Jordan, who's a greyhound, sleeping there, and I do have a greyhound adoption shirt on today. And people, if you ever want a great dog, there's your dog. I mean, she's a terrific dog. So I'm just that's my PSA for today.
And Jordan sleeping is not a commentary on the show.
No, and the thing is, she's actually named after Michael Jordan too, because her tongue comes out when she's like flustered, and so Michael Jordan's tongue used to come out. But we're not going to do any crying Jordan.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not going to happen.
We'll have to bring this up. I don't know if did we bring it up on a previous webcast about the crying.
I think we did.
I still don't understand it. It's hilarious, but it's gotten to the point of it's overkill. Come on.
It's like Rick Roll. It's too much.
Yeah. One further thing on the bad contracts, then we'll get started on the news of the day. We mentioned before we went live. Sam Bradford signs I think it was a 5-year extension with the Eagles. Now, Bradford was brought in by Chip Kelly as the quarterback. He had a pretty good year. Was banged up a couple times, which is what normally happens with Sam Bradford. But they signed him to an extension. And the thing is, now they made a trade. They traded up to the 2nd pick in the draft. They draft Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
They had another quarterback already in camp who is basically could change. I mean, this guy signs a 5-year contract and he may not get a chance to start. and he's asked to be traded. And I mean, the Eagles really screwed this guy bad, if you ask me.
Yeah, this was a situation where they put the cart before the horse. They tried to cover themselves in all possible angles. And we have to remember, these are human beings that you're dealing with. So think about this for a minute. And I knew this was, when I saw this happening, I knew this was going to be a problem. And look, we're not football guys. You could just tell as a human being, he gets signed. He figures he's the number one guy. Okay, no problem. Then all of a sudden, Chase Daniels gets signed. And he's probably thinking, all right, Chase Daniels is my backup. I know he's close with Peterson, but I can live with that. I still got paid very well, all is well. Then he hears they're trading to go up in the draft to get a quarterback. And usually what that means is that guy's going to play pretty soon, whether it's this year or next year. And technically, Bradford's deal is technically a 2-year deal, even though they have an out after a year. And so at the end of the day, he's probably thinking to himself, this is not what I signed up for. Now, granted, fans are going to say you're getting your money, you're paid. This is the way it is. But you know what? He said he didn't think all these things were going to happen. This wasn't discussed with him. In a way, I understand what he's doing here. I mean, it's a hard line to take to say you're holding out. He could lose $2.3 million by actually holding out for the 16 days or whatever he might do it. But he's made like $80 million. So this is like pocket change for him. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's outrageous for him to ask for a trade because the Eagles literally tried to cover everything. Let's get our quarterback of the future. Let's get our quarterback tutor. Let's still have a number one quarterback. Let's try and make the playoffs. You can't do that. You can't.
Yeah, and there are quarterbacks. There are teams out there without quarterbacks, like the Jets. I mean, Denver drafted.
Cleveland has five.
Yeah, and it's sort of like goaltenders in the NHL. When you have 2 goaltenders, you have none. When you have 5 quarterbacks, you have none. But Cleveland, you could say maybe even Buffalo, but they're going to probably go with Tyrod Taylor. But there's 4 or 5 teams out there that need a quarterback and don't. So Bradford has an opportunity here, but apparently not. So,
but the problem is the money. Like even the Jets can't take on his money. He would have to rip up his deal, or the Eagles would have to eat that money and just get a high draft pick and call it a day. And a high draft pick is a 2nd or a 3rd rounder. They're not getting a 1st rounder for him.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about hockey because there's some news. Some big news in the NHL today. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2016.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eck is not here today. He will be back tomorrow. Russ, some big news that came out around 11 o'clock. Bob Hartley, the 2015 Jack Adams winner, Coach of the Year, just 12 months ago, has been fired by the Calgary Flames. Hartley, after taking the Flames, who were not expected to make the playoffs 2 years ago, or last season, got to the 2nd round, lose to Anaheim. They got by Vancouver in the 1st round. They go 35, 40, and 7, and
with no goaltending. With 0 goaltending.
Well, I mean, last year I have to give credit to ex-favorite goaltender Kari Ramo. Kari Ramo and Jonas Hiller did play well last year. This year,
no, this year was awful.
Well, I always say last year, meaning 2 seasons ago, 14-15.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's my problem. 2 years ago, 14-15, they both played great, and they carried the Flames to the playoffs. This year, they played like Kari Ramo and Jonas Hiller. They were terrible, and
Hiller's not even in the NHL anymore.
Yeah, Hiller knew he fell off so bad that he ran to the Swiss League as soon as he could get a long-term contract, which was I'd said in January when the guy had an .860 save percentage.
Yep.
So Hartley's out, and after listening to Brad Treliving, the Flames general manager, I think it was a factor to say that this was a coach that they inherited from Jay Feaster and not hired themselves.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here because Brad Treliving inherited some of this. Hartley inherited all of it, meaning the goaltending situation. Like, I don't know what coach would have lived through that goaltending this year. I mean, I saw them more than enough times to live and otherwise, to say, wow, they were just getting awful performances on so many nights. It just, when your goaltending's that bad, it derails your team. It does. So now another coach is going to come in, but unless they correct the goaltending situation, like John Gillis is coming off ACL, so he's not going to be playing in the NHL this year. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. And so, like, where are they going to go? Like, this is a situation where this is not a destination team. Even though they're a Canadian market, coaches out there or prospective coaches out there are going to look at this situation and say, you've got to shore up some roster here before I even want to come here. They're not going to say it publicly, but I as human beings, I think they're going to think that, and I don't blame them.
Well, I mean, Ramo is a UFA. Ordio is in the loop, but I think at best he's an NHL backup. He did play well at the end of the year, but again, you can never look at what a team does in the last quarter of the season and believe that what they do is relative. I mean, what they do
is sometimes they're playing teams that have, that are in the playoffs and are not playing at full strength. Like, that is the worst barometer for people to gauge. Like, hey, that last little bit of the season we look good, and we're going to carry that momentum into next year.
Well, let's go back to the coaching, then we can come to the team itself and the goaltending situation, because I think that's going to be a big part of them going forward. From the reports, the reports with the player meetings after the season, supposedly the players were pretty hard on Hartley and how difficult he was, and he's a very demanding.
He's a taskmaster, yeah.
Taskmaster, which would lend you to believe, using what normally happens in the NHL, they usually go from a taskmaster to a player-friendly coach. This is a very young team. A lot of players, the Goudreaus, the Monahans, Dougie Hamilton's only 23 years old.
Jankowski could be in the mix this year. We'll see.
Sam Bennett. I mean, this is a young team, and they more than likely want a coach who can develop. Now, that may mean a veteran coach. That may mean a younger coach. That's the question.
Well, let's look at that. Okay, so let's look at that. So we've seen what happens when you bring in a veteran coach, like when Ted Nolan had a bunch of young guys in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. They played hard, but not all of them developed. And that was a problem, right? So I'm of the ilk that says, bring in a young coach here. A young coach is good for young players. Luke Richardson was out there for a while. He never got a spot. Travis Green, we've talked about. Look at somebody like that to work with the young players and develop. I know you made the playoffs 2 years ago, but the chances of you making the playoffs next year aren't great. So the best thing they can do is still try and develop the players that they have. And these guys that we were just talking about, their defense is in pretty good shape. They have a fairly good amount of offensive players. They definitely need more, but their goaltending's in the shambles. And so, until those things are really shored up, and I'm not even sure just going to get the right veteran goalie puts them in the playoffs either. Right. And there's other holes there too. But I think get a younger coach. Don't get another recycled coach. I always hear this. The one phrase that kind of bugs me, look, everybody's got their talents, right? But I always hear, well, this coach will get you from A to B. Like, if I'm an owner, I don't want a coach that gets me from A to B, and now I got to worry about hiring another coach. And I'm sure GMs aren't thrilled when they have to sort of do that too. And so instead of getting a stopgap coach, get a guy you feel can be there for at least 5 years. Like Hartley was there for 4 years. 4 years in this NHL is actually a pretty good run if you think about it.
Yeah, through two administrations. Yeah, definitely. Right. But the thing is, and this is the question I posed to you before the show, is Brad Treliving hiring this coach, or is it in concert with Brian Burke? Because if it's in concert with Brian Burke, I think that you bring into the mix some of the old guys. And I'm not saying, and I like.
They're going to get paraded through. There's no doubt, because Burke's a voice in the room. Yeah. Treliving is in charge, but Burke is a very important voice in the room, and I'm sure he's got the ear of ownership as well. Right. And so there's going to be a parade of those kind of guys that you just talked about. But Treliving's going to make that final decision, and so we'll see who he gravitates towards and goes with. But at the end of the day, like Bruce Boudreau, right? I mean, guilt by association. Hartley gets fired. He just got fired the other day. Everybody assumes, oh, look, it'll be Bruce Boudreau. It's like I said, I don't know if Bruce Boudreau should fall right into another job like this.
Well, apparently he is, Russ, because Ottawa and Minnesota have already asked for permission. He's already talked to Ottawa. Chuck Fletcher apparently is heading to California, and now this situation opens up. And they wanted
Is it unfair to ask how many Stanley Cups he's won? Is that unfair? No, but is it unfair? Like, I know, here's the thing. In this league, if you've won one Stanley Cup, you seem to be able to get 4 or 5 other jobs after that to sort of try and get it back and win another cup. And if you've won 0 Stanley Cups, I get that he's a good guy. I get he's a good hockey guy and everything else. But you're telling me he immediately moves to the top of the line past any other prospect? Like Mike Eaves is out there. He's coached forever in Wisconsin. He is now a free agent coach. Seeing what Dave Haxtell did, is someone going to call Mike Eaves in there? I would.
Yeah, but your argument about the Stanley Cup. I mean, Randy Carlyle got an interview in San Jose and was in consideration before they opted for Peter DeBoer. Mark Crawford has, he won a Stanley Cup, but it was in the 20th century. So, it's a question of but he coached Austin Matthews in Switzerland. He's back in North America. He's apparently looking for a job, and Burke and him are associated from Vancouver. Burke is associated with Carlisle from Anaheim, winning a Stanley Cup in 2007, and he hired him in Toronto. And Crawford was a candidate when they fired Ron Wilson in 2012. Guy Boucher is out there. Mike Yeo
can coach, right? There's no doubt they can coach, but the issue is, you're looking at a different league now.
Yeah.
And Crawford was just overseas. Now, granted, he was with Austin Matthews, but he's in the Swiss League. The Swiss League doesn't closely resemble the NHL. That doesn't mean he can't walk in and coach in the NHL. But again, we saw what happened when Barry Melrose tried to come back and coach in the NHL. Right. It was awful. No offense, Barry, you're a good guy, but it was an awful moment there for Tampa, right? And I think you have to sort of look at least I would think, if you're GMs definitely think about this because they're critical thinkers. But I think if you're an owner, you have to sort of look at this and say, I need somebody really relevant, because the league that I see right now still might be different in 2 years with this new coach, because that's what happens a lot of times in drafts too, right? Like we see it. I remember, and I'll use this as an example, if there's a team out there 5 years ago that says we're drafting for toughness, I always say, that's great, but like when the toughness gets there in 5 years, will this be a league that toughness even works for anymore? And like some teams used to draft for size, by the time those guys would come around, it would be a smaller league. Like those things happen.
Reference Tyler Biggs.
Yeah.
And somebody on Twitter brought up this morning and said, what about Ron Wilson? Did you watch Team USA in the 2016 World Junior?
He couldn't have been worse. I mean, no offense to Ron. It didn't even seem like he was interested in the job, right? At times he looks disinterested doing it. So I don't think you want Ron Wilson.
I think Boudreau – let's just play like some musical chairs here. I think Boudreau fits and makes sense in Minnesota because he's got a team of, there's talent there, there's depth there, there's not a lot of movement possible. I mean, they have to sign Matt Dumba. They may have to move out of Jonas Brodin to move out to sign Dumba to a long-term extension if he wants the long-term deal. But pretty much you've got Parise and Vanek, Pominville, Koivu, that group, and the Coyle and the Niedermeyer or the Niederreiter underneath. That's a pretty ready-made team and a team that made the playoffs. So that fits Boudreau, and the goaltending and the defense is there. That fits Boudreau's MO, I think, better than a teaching situation in Calgary or a budget-limited situation in Ottawa.
Sure, I would agree with that. I think that's a fair assessment based on the talent and the roster. Now, the problem is, and again, this is the other problem. You bring in a coach, you're out of season now, right? A lot of times, look what happened with Marian Gaborik and John Tortorella. It didn't fit.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they had to move Gaborik, and they didn't get a great trade for Gaborik. And the Kings did, right? So when the Kings eventually got him, they did. And so I just look at it and I say, you know what? This is dangerous because, like, for Minnesota's sake, let's say they bring in Boudreau, and let's just say they move Matt Dumba. Well, you might find out that Brodin doesn't fit in Bruce Boudreau's system at all, and you just gave up a really good offensive defenseman who happens to be physical. So, like, those are risks now that that are really going to be tough for teams to sort of get. Because look, even a coach like in New York, like Alain Vigneault, there's certain guys he likes, there's certain guys he doesn't like, types of players. And right now it doesn't seem like he likes Dylan McIlrath as an example, right? Now, if you brought in a player 3 years ago, well, it's more than that now, but if you brought in a player, pre-administration to Vigneault, and then all of a sudden he walks on the ice and a month into it is like, he doesn't really fit my system, what do you do? And so I think Minnesota's in a tough spot. I don't know what they should do, but if I were them, I would keep Dumba, because the way if nothing else, if the Pittsburgh Penguins aren't showing you anything else, while Brodin is very valuable because he plays a lot of minutes and he skates well and everything else, right, Dumba has way more upside still, and I still don't think he's tapped into all that. He's still a young defenseman. Not that they're both young, but he's younger.
Well, and putting A and B together regarding Boudreau, if there is interest in Calgary with Boudreau, it's probably not going to happen right away, according to the press conference, or according to, I think it was John Shannon from Hockey Central, had mentioned that Treliving is heading over to the World Championships like today or tomorrow. Yeah. So who they're going to hire in terms of the head coach is probably not going to happen for at least a few weeks. But if Boudreau is in the loop there, that could be an indication of where the goaltending situation goes, because the guy whose name is on the market the most is Freddie Anderson, somebody right, who Boudreau had a lot of confidence with, going with him in the conference finals 2 seasons ago, and went to him after Gibson faltered and after losing the first 2 games against Nashville. So that's
a dangerous combination and leap of faith too, because in the end that combination didn't get it done.
No, it didn't. But the thing is, Russ, there are limited options right now in terms of goaltending. I mean, Jonathan Bernier was a plan B for Calgary during the season when he had a save percentage under .900. They Treliving and Burke were in Toronto watching Bernier let goals go by.
Well, Reimer's a UFA, isn't he?
Reimer's a UFA, and Burke knows him from Toronto, and I think
that's a possibility.
That's a possibility. Cam Ward, if you want to go for a stop.
Yeah, they're not gonna. I don't think they're gonna go with the age anymore. I think at least Reimer would give you a not old goalie, sort of like a middle-aged goalie, which is fine, right? Because he's got a lot of years left, and maybe with a good defensive system, I could see a little bit better play coming out of Reimer with a better defensive system, and Calgary's really shaping up defensively, so maybe that's a good fit there.
But there are not many options on this. I mean, Anderson is a logical option. But
you're forgetting about trades too. Like at some point, Tampa may pull the plug on either Bishop or Vasilevsky.
Yes.
With the way everything's shaking out contract-wise. Don't worry, we're not talking about Stamkos today, but I'm just saying one of those guys could become available.
Yeah, and I also heard something that's pretty curious, and I don't know anybody who would be really interested in him at the price tag that he is currently at, but the play of Louis Domingue in Arizona down the stretch until Mike Smith came back. Mike Smith's making over $5 million.
He's expendable.
Yeah, he's expendable. They could go with Domingue and trade Mike Smith. They may think Domingue can be a number 1 goaltender. So if there's somebody out there that needs a number 1
there's no reason not to give Domingue a chance, right? I mean, I just wrote about him recently, and I would have to say if I were the GM of that team, I'd explore that, because there's no reason not to, and then you could lose some salary there. I think you'd be fine. So, yeah, I think putting Smith out there is fine. I also think St. Louis, are they really going to continue to hold on to Binnington and Allen and Elliott? Probably not.
No.
Somebody's going to be available, whether it's via trade or, it's always going to be via trade at this point. But somebody's going to be available from that group.
It's a question of whether it be Allen or Binnington. I mean, based on the fact that they're going with Elliott in the playoffs, I would suspect they're not going to get rid of him over the summer. Another one, and I, because I've been looking at angles regarding the Leafs and goaltending. You've got Varlamov making over $5 million, and you've got Calvin Pickard is an RFA at the end of this year. I know that Colorado likes him, but it's a situation where he could. I mean, he's had, as a backup 2 years in a row, has had pretty good statistics. He might be somebody that an NHL team says, I think I could give that guy 55 to 60 games, and he could be my starter.
I'll tell you who the smartest team is. Right now, the smartest team is in this situation is the Capitals, and I'll tell you why. They have Ilya Samsonov overseas, and they're like, take your time. Don't worry about it. There's no rush. And so he could come over in 5 years. Like, let's say in 5 years, Holtby's contract becomes too much for him or his play's not great. Then they'll bring him over. You know what I mean? It's like there's no rush there. And that's the best way, because nowadays it's hard to really cultivate. Like, Philly's been able to do it, but Neuwirth's deals up after next year. It's hard to cultivate two goalies and keep it going with a cap. And that's unless you want to have, again, like Henrik Lundqvist makes a ton, and so does Rene. But there are teams like Dallas that have so much put into two goalies. It's not ideal.
It's the perfect situation for Washington because he was a 15 draft pick, which means he won't be a problem with the expansion draft. So they expose Phil Grubauer, who really cares.
Right. Who is good, but he probably won't get taken.
No slight against him. I'm just saying Holtby is the likely Vezina winner and has played wonderfully this year.
And they still have their goalie of the future. If you think about it, that was really smart on their part.
Yeah. Getting to Holtby and what happened last night, the Penguins jump out to a 3-0 lead and hold on for a 3-2 victory.
And they did hold on.
And they did hold on at the Council Energy Center in Pittsburgh. Matt Murray, the Wunderkind, makes 47 saves. Holtby only made 20, and I thought at least one of the goals was not good. I mean,
this was his first bad game of the playoffs, and it's not a terrible game, and one of those goals was bad. What I kind of laugh about with Braden Holtby, and I'm not making fun of him, but this is kind of interesting. After every goal, he takes off his mask and he drinks water. At some point, doesn't he drink too much water if he gives up 5 or 6 goals? I mean, he probably hasn't done it all year, but it's just kind of a weird tick that he's got.
Russ, I've wondered that about gold. I understand that these guys are wearing heavy equipment and they're sweating like crazy. But I know goaltenders, I see goaltenders who after every stoppage, they take off the mask, they'll take out the water bottle and they'll either they're just rinsing their mouth or they're drinking. I mean, how do they not have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the first period? Really?
It's a miracle. It really is. I mean, this is like the unknown stuff about hockey, and you can't ask them in an interview. But it is kind of interesting, and I don't know why I went there, but I did go there. But as far as the series, look, I mean, the Capitals carried the play. Things didn't work out for them. Murray played great. I think we at least could finally get full support for Matt Murray saying, okay, yeah, this kid could be a number one, because I kind of sensed when I was saying it weeks and weeks ago that people weren't really on board with it. They needed to see more, right?
Right.
Well, I think you've seen enough now where you realize this kid's the real deal. And so that's a good thing for Pittsburgh. Now, does this spell the end for Marc-Andre Fleury? It might. He could be one of those goalies on the market.
Yes, he could, but I mean, I think the concussion problem is going to scare a few teams away. I mean, that has to be factored in. One thing I have to say, it's like Pittsburgh, at least last night, got offense from secondary sources. It wasn't Crosby carrying them on their back. It was Kuhnhackl. It was Hagelin. And Hornquist is he's on the top line, but they're getting secondary scoring. Whereas I mean last night Ovechkin got the first goal, and I think that those Chimeras, the Tom Wilsons, Kuznetsov really hasn't been on the radar and been that effective in the entire playoffs. Not to the same level he was during the regular season. I mean, it can't be up to Holtby to stop and hold off the Penguins all game. I think that.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But this is where I'm going to be a broken record. But now, if you fall down 3-1 in this series, right now they're not. So right now they're not probably thinking about this. If you fall down 3-1 in this series, is it worth it to have Mike Richards in the lineup anymore?
Yeah, but who gets inserted instead of Mike Richards?
I don't know who their black aces are now. I mean, because Hershey's going pretty far too. I mean, Hershey might be in the Calder Cup, so I'd have to review their black aces. But I'm just saying, that they have somebody. And my point is, other than playing the penalty kill, what else is Mike Richards doing for you? Do you see anything?
No. He's basically a fourth line center, face-off guy, and penalty killer, and that's basically it.
So at some point they maybe become desperate for goal scoring, and having another guy in there. is sometimes better. I mean, I'm just saying they have to start thinking that way if they fall back in this series 3-1, but they probably won't. I think they played well. I think you're right. They need better secondary scoring. The funny thing is, how many teams has Matt Cullen played for?
At least 3. I know Hartford, Carolina.
Right. The Rangers,
Rangers,
Penguins.
Yeah, there's more than 3.
More than that too. He's probably played for 5 or 6 teams.
Right.
Now, coming off this playoffs, why do I still get the feeling he's still only getting a 1 or a 2-year deal, whether it's from the Penguins or somebody else? Like almost like, hey, we appreciate your effort. We know that you did a lot for us, but we kind of look at you as a hired gun, and that's that.
Well, it's because he's 39 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now. Anaheim, Florida, Carolina, New York, Ottawa, Minnesota, Nashville, Pittsburgh. So
he's 39, but, he's playing, Yager's playing. I mean, so he could make the argument, hey, I could do this as long as Yager can. I mean, I'm just saying, it's just a weird thing that this guy has been such a factor.
Well, it's funny because he's 39, and obviously he doesn't play like he's 39. He doesn't skate like he's 39.
Right.
He's sort of like one of those ageless guys like Mike Gartner. Mike Gartner could skate when he was 40. Matt Cullen has never been a big scorer, but he can skate, and he can keep up with the pace.
Right.
I mean, when Malkin went down and Bonino was hurt, Matt Cullen stepped in between Kessel and I think Hagelin and played well. And he's played well in the playoffs. So he's been a big part of the Penguins' success. And, I mean, his experiences showed. What has to be considered in a factor for Game 4, obviously, is the situation with Kris Letang. He will be facing a hearing with the Department of Player Safety after a hit to Marcus Johansson. He only got a 2-minute interference penalty. Johansson came
back. Which is
back.
A joke. That was a joke.
Johansson came back in the game but did not practice today, and I guess he went through the concussion protocol in the dark room and everything and passed it. But
he played at the end of the game. He almost scored with like 15 seconds to go. He took a rocket that missed the top of the net by just a little bit. Yeah.
But he didn't skate this morning, and it's possible that that's gamesmanship. I mean, I think
to some degree it is. Let's face it. Teams always want to try and get the other guy in trouble, but this is something that, and this is where we have that argument, hey, guys get away with stuff, whatever. Letang does seem to have an awfully long rope when it comes to these kinds of hits. Right. And it's not the first time he's done it.
Well, he's
had it happen to him, too.
He's a star defenseman, like Ovechkin's a star player. I mean, the thing is, and this is the thing that drives me crazy, and I understand why it does, and I understand what the reaction to it is. But Brooks Orpik hits Mata. Mata could be out for the series. It was a serious concussion. Orpik gets 3 games. You cannot tell me that the suspension was longer because of the severity of the hit. Now here, Letang hits Johansson. Johansson could be out next game, may not be. He came back in the game, and I would say the odds are probably at least 50-50 that he gets a fine rather than a game. I think he's going to end up getting a game. But if he gets,
I don't think he's going to get a game. I think I'm with you. I think he's going to get a fine. Do I think he should get a game? Yeah.
And this is the thing. It's like, okay, because Johansson came back, he's going to get a fine instead of a game. Okay, so if I only attempt to murder somebody, I shouldn't be put in jail. But if I murder somebody, I should be put away for life. I mean, it's illogical. It's not the result. It's the penalty. It's what he did.
Right.
And that's where the NHL, every single time they go down the road, if the guy comes back, it doesn't matter if some guy threw a flying body block. If the guy's not hurt, the guy's not hurt. Just let everything, and we'll fine him $2,000, which is...
the problem is, like what we said before, he only got 2 minutes in the game. When you only get 2 minutes in the game and then the league has a hearing set up, you know that there's a problem with the way you're calling the game.
Right, and what I'm wondering is he got away with knocking 3 of Victor Stahlberg's teeth out in the first round.
He did, yeah. But they're looking at that too. They have to.
Right. So the thing is, with the recidivism rate of Kris Letang, if he's had one thing in the first round, they may have said to him, okay, you got away with that one, but if something else happens, we're going to get you again. We're going to,
Right.
we're going to penalize you. So it could be a cumulative effect. It could be something like, okay, you got away with that, but now,
Right.
as a standalone event, maybe you wouldn't get suspended for a game, but here we're going to suspend you for a game. Plus, if Letang is out, obviously the Caps with Letang and Mata out are going to be favored dramatically.
It should be a game. It should be a game.
Right.
All right. So here's another factor, though. When Boston University won the Frozen Four back in 2009, 2010, I always have to double check because I get my years screwed up.
Okay.
Nick Bonino was on that team, and there is something to be said about clutch players being in big situations and being able to handle it. He's able to handle it. Like, he is making plays out there. Yeah. He's probably one of the 5 most valuable guys on that team right now in this playoff run. And so I wonder what his contract status is, because, again, Nick Bonino is going to be, even though he only had 29 points in the regular season, he's earning his pay and then some.
Nick Bonino is under contract for another year at $1.9 million, and then he's a UFA. So if he has a good regular season next year, he could stand to make a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, it was in 2009 that they won the title, and he's going to make some money. And he's been very impressive, and he has been every bit of the playmaker I kind of thought he'd be. Because, again, you don't have to be a playmaker that scores 55, 60 points a year.
Right.
But it's key goals. And it always seems like when we're looking up and there's a big goal, the Bonino line has been leading that charge. So he's been impressive. I want to give him his due, because I don't think anybody really talks about him, and no one really did talk about him until he filled in for Malkin, and then all of a sudden things went great for him.
Yeah, it clicked. I mean, it's really weird how Phil Kessel clicks with centers who don't need the puck.
Correct.
I mean, Tyler Bozak is a good playmaker, but the reason that him and Kessel worked in Toronto was because Phil Kessel was the center of that line. The center.
But he knows a hard worker. Like, he gets the puck in the corners. He gets it to those scorers. He does.
Right, and Bozak basically was covering defensively for Kessel and Van Riemsdyk, making forays into the offensive zone. So it didn't work with Crosby. It didn't work with Malkin, and it worked with Nick Bonino and Matt Cullen. So
I do want to also say, speaking of the name Kessel, Amanda Kessel got signed by the New York Riveters yesterday. I was happy to see that, because she's one of the great women's players ever, and I guess she's over her post-concussion. So congrats to her, because it'll be fun to see her play again.
Yeah, that's good to hear. But and her brother Phil was apparently trying to have a discussion with Alex Ovechkin last night about that pictures that he was taking at the All-Star game a few years ago. I couldn't believe Phil Kessel was actually getting in a physical confrontation with Alex Ovechkin. That was hilarious. Okay, let's move on to the announcement yesterday of the Calder Trophy nominations.
Oh boy, here we go.
As expected, as we predicted, Shane Gostisbehere of the Philadelphia Flyers, Artemi Panarin of the Chicago Blackhawks, and Connor McDavid of the Edmonton Oilers were the nominees for the Calder. Omitted were John Gibson, Anaheim goaltender, Jack Eichel, and of the Buffalo Sabres, and Dylan Larkin, and probably there's a few other rookies.
Parayko, there's other guys, but they definitely are a little lower on the list. Yeah,
Max Domi as well. I mean, this was a great year for rookies.
It was,
but I have a little bit of a problem. I know you have a big problem with the final 3.
I do, because, again, and I'm not a Connor McDavid hater, because I think the kid's tremendous. But, again, we don't need to put him in the Calder list just so 10 years from now we could say, oh, yeah, look, see, he did get recognized even though he didn't win, because it's happened before, because Wayne Gretzky didn't win a Calder. Who cares? The idea of the Calder is that year. It's a very specific award. Who's doing great that year? Did McDavid do great? Yes. Did he go through the same grind that every other player that you mentioned did? No. He got hurt. He didn't play nearly as many games. Going through the grind is a big deal, because if you noticed, Gostisbehere did hit a wall in the playoffs. It happens to every young player. Now, Panarin's not young, and at the fact that he's 24, he never hit a wall. He had 7 points in the playoffs, and now everybody's up in arms about that, the same way people were up in arms for Ichiro back in the day for MLB. The Makarov rule is 27 years, right?
Yeah.
I think it needs to be updated. Not because Panarin's not deserving, but because when you are a pro for a certain amount of years and then you are going up against an 18-year-old, I think that sort of pushes the spirit of the award. I do.
Well, if they have a 23 and under team for the World Cup, maybe they should have a 20. It should be 23 and under for the Calder.
I think 23 is a good age because, and it could, and if it went to 22, I'm good with that too.
No. The point that you make is valid in terms of like he didn't go through the grind.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. For me, that's part of it. The other part of it is, did he make his team better? His team was the second worst in the league. Now, their record with him, I'm sure, was a lot better, but they were horrendous. And he was, he is deemed by a lot of people, a generational player, and I agree with it. He's phenomenal. He's a great talent. I want to watch him all the time because he's a great player. But the argument, and I heard this from people who probably had votes that said, I can't go years down the line and say that I didn't vote for Connor McDavid for Rookie of the Year. And I'm like, sure, he only played 40 some odd or 50 some odd games, whatever it was. He didn't play a full season. So how can you?
Here's what makes this award tough this year. You have Panarin, who's the older guy who positively impacted his team, but also played on a line with Patrick Kane. You have to sort of balance that. He had 77 points or something. He had 30 goals. I mean, it's crazy. Those are crazy rookie numbers, but most rookies don't get to play with Patrick Kane either. Now, we can make the argument at times he made Kane better. I give him credit for that because he's a smart player, but he's not an all-around player. Dylan Larkin's actually the best all-around player of this bunch, but he didn't play top-line center minutes the whole year. Right. McDavid did. So we have to give McDavid credit for that, but McDavid's faceoffs weren't very good. So if anybody was looking at his faceoff percentage, and especially in games that they lost, his faceoff percentage was really bad. And so, actually, no, not when they lost. When they won, his faceoff percentage wasn't great. And so, and I wrote about that. It's on Sportsology if people want to read it. But the idea is you have those two. Well, you have those Sportsology.com. We redid it. It looks nice. But anyhow, you have to look at those things. You have to sort of, and I'm not saying the writers didn't, but then again, so to me, Larkin's the best all-around player. Eichel really came on at the end. What did he have, like 20-something goals?
24 goals and 32 assists. I mean, in any other year, he'd be a finalist. I mean, I had the benefit of seeing him all the time, Russ.
And Gostisbehere had the biggest impact on his team.
Yes.
Nobody could deny that. He had the biggest impact. There's all kinds of stats talking about how many times he got a goal to either put him in the lead or give him a win. Now, what's the soft part of his thing? He did have a bunch of overtime goals. He did, on 3-on-3. It's the way the game is now, though. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors here which this has never really been this contested. But I feel like for all the years, and this year I didn't have a vote, but I've been voting for a long time, and they rotate them. This is one of the most hotly contested Calder votes ever. Like, the one that was the least contested was when Barrett Jackman won. No offense to Barrett Jackman, but that was the least contested. This is the most contested. Like, I think it's good for the award because a lot of people are talking about it, and that makes me happy. But I do think we do need to see a change. 27 years old is too old.
No offense to Barrett Jackman. That must have been a hell of a bad year. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, looking at this, if you look at it objectively in terms of who scored the most, who had the most impact, you would think that Panarin is going to win. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, in the end, I would have to vote for Panarin because his numbers offensively are just so good that I can't really discount the other things, like he doesn't play defense, which he doesn't, but it's just not enough. And then Gostisbehere would be second. Connor McDavid would be third. But really, on my list, Connor McDavid would be fourth.
Yeah, but and that's the thing. On a lot of people's lists, he will be first.
Yeah.
And, will it be considered an injustice that Connor McDavid wins Rookie of the Year with a partial with 2/3 of the season? I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's something we can talk about until the NHL awards, but
it depends which side of the border you're on.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then that's true. And I'm not to be parochial here, but I just it's and maybe Panarin will be hurt by the fact that he's in his mid-20s.
Maybe.
And then if it's between Gostisbehere and McDavid, I would say, okay, well, then one guy carried his team practically on his back to get them in the playoffs. and the other guy played well, but his team finished 29th. So,
Right.
okay. Yesterday at the end of the show, we discussed the contract, the Maple Leafs signing defenseman Nikita Zaitsev to a 1-year contract. We'll see what Zaitsev is. I mean, it's tough to gauge what a KHL defenseman who's been there played there for 7 seasons, what he's going to do with the NHL. He has a lot of experience. He's got NHL size. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, right-hand shot, good offensive, good skating. He speaks fluent English, so communication won't be a problem.
Do we know how much he made in the KHL, like last year's salary?
I don't, but the Leafs gave him a 1-year entry-level contract, $925,000 1-year deal with bonuses.
Right.
That could get him up close to $2 million if he hits all of them. But he's an RFA after 1 year, which allows him to go to arbitration or allows them to qualify him and then negotiate a longer-term deal. He's got to get through the entry-level deal. But the thing was, and Chris Johnston from Sportsnet reported this, and I thought it was curious, there is a European assignment clause in his deal. If he if he doesn't make it, or if he needs to be sent down, and they think he has to go back to the KHL, he does not or cannot be sent back to the American Hockey League.
Right.
Which is curious.
And here's the thing about it, and I can't find his worth there, but I'm going to guess he probably got somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million bucks. That's my guess. And so here's the thing. I'm glad it's finally spelled out so we could talk about it, because we've kind of known for years that a lot of these talented Russian kids who could play in the KHL wanted no part of the AHL. Mm-hmm. Regardless of you thinking, hey, don't be entitled, you have to work your way up, you have to look at it economically and say, these kids are taking care of their families. I don't think people realize that the families actually help them decide who they're going to play for year to year more than like their American agents. Mm-hmm. The families have a lot more influence. The players feel like they do need to take care of their families and do need to make X amount over there before they come to the NHL. So they've sort of fulfilled their family obligation. I don't think people realize that. And that's what's going on with Pavel Buchnevich now too. And so I'm pretty sure he's going to get the same sort of contract offer from the Rangers, because he's not going to want any part of the AHL, and he's not going to want to work his way up. And you know what? You could say, hey, that's the wrong way to go. But then he could just say, hey, listen, if you don't have a spot for me, this team does, Right. And they paid me well last year, CKSA, right? That's who had him, and they'll pay him well again. And, he'll probably get an apartment and a car. And so this is what the NHL has to compete with now. But I think the AHL needs to sort of raise their salaries the same way that people, and this is, a lot of people are going to get mad at this, the same way minimum wage is going up in the U.S. This is not minimum wage that we're talking about, but this is just talking about a competitive wage for an industry. And if you really want to lure players, get them to play here and work their way up, then you have to pay them better, and you got to pay them more than $70,000, $75,000 a year, because at the end of the day, they look at that and say, why should I do that when I could get this over there?
For those who don't know, the entry-level deal in the NHL, if it's a first-round pick, for example, or a player who's in demand, the entry-level deal, $925,000 at the NHL level, that's and they get it prorated. They get
for every day they spend in the NHL.
Right, exactly, and that's why, like, when a player gets called up at the end of the season, they say they're rewarding them. They're rewarding them because they're giving them that NHL salary and not the AHL salary, which on an entry-level deal is $70,000. So, a guy.
Now think about if you're a kid that's playing in Bakersfield or somewhere in California where the cost of living's pretty high. You're struggling a little bit.
Or Toronto.
I know nobody wants to hear about it because, hockey players make a lot of money. I don't make a lot of money in my everyday job, but these kids are going through a struggle too.
Or Toronto. I mean, there's some players on the Marlies who are from the Toronto area. I wouldn't doubt that they're still living with their families because $70,000 American in Toronto is not a lot. So but the interesting thing is, and because I encountered this a few years ago, Leo Komarov came over from the KHL the year of the lockout. and he played for the Marlies for about a month and a half. And once it was found out that the lockout was going to be longer than expected, he said, "Okay, I have a contract with you, but I'm going to go back to Dynamo, go back to Moscow until the lockout is over with. And then when it's over with, I'll come back and play for the Leafs. Because I didn't come here to play for the Marlies. I came here to play for the Leafs. I came here to play in the NHL. Because he had opportunities to come over, or he was waiting for the opportunity to come over to the NHL. He didn't think he had to prove anything at the AHL level, and that's where some of these players are. Another Finn, Petri Kontiola, he came over, signed a one-way contract with Toronto, was making over $1 million. He got sent to the minors. They never called him up again, and he bolted for the KHL because he didn't want to ride the buses in the American Hockey League. So I understand that point of view, and I understand the monetary aspect of it. But the thing is, I think sometimes it's less than monetary, because Contiola was making $1 million here. He probably would have rather made a little less, flying planes in the KHL than taking buses in the American Hockey League.
So So now let's talk about maybe a more entitled player in Radulov, right? So we still hear the rumors, and I did hear a rumor that he was in New York before he went out to work with the World Championship team. Now, that doesn't mean he was talking to the Rangers,
right?
But it probably did mean he had a meeting to talk about all the other teams that have interest in him. And I love a lot of these fan bases are like, well, I'd give him a couple $1 million. He's not coming here for a couple $1 million. Yeah. Radulov is all about the money, and he is coming here for the highest contract and the best situation. That's what he's coming here for. And so you go back and you look at his last year in 2011, 2012, 7 points in 9 games, and he had 6 points in 8 games in the playoffs. Pretty good. Is he worth $4 million though? Because even at the age now that he was much younger then too, he's now 29, and even in the last 2 years with CSKA, 24 goals and 23 goals. It's not like he was lighting up that league.
I almost think in a way, even though he's 30, he's going to be treated like Yager in a sense that somebody will give him a 1-year deal for big money.
But he never had the Yager work ethic. He never did.
And I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying teams will approach Radulov like they approached Semin. Give him like Washington did. Give him the 1-year deal, see what he does, then we'll give him another one, or we'll give him a couple years. As soon as Semin got that big money, that 5-year contract in Carolina, we saw the character of what Alex Semin was. That might be the equivalent of the Pablo Sandoval deal. Because they gave him $7 million for 5 years each year for 5 years, and he dropped off the face of the earth with Carolina. So,
Radulov's probably not getting more than a 2-year deal, I don't think.
I think he may get it. Yeah, he might get a 1. Depends on where.
He might get 1 with an option.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to set his worth here. Like, I'm thinking in my mind, and I'm thinking if I'm a team, there's no way I could spend more than $4 million with the way the cap is.
Yeah, I think 4 is reasonable, because this is a guy you don't have to give up anything to get. He's a UFA. Right. He's had NHL experience. He's a veteran. He's a bit of a loose cannon if you've seen any of his highlights in the KHL and things that he does.
So here's the thing. Okay, so now, for the Ranger fans that want him, or fans of big city teams, do you want this guy in a big city on your team? Because he could be trouble off the ice for that team.
Yeah, I've heard Colorado be mentioned, and I think that's the connection with him and Patrick Waugh.
Right.
I heard Detroit, and that's a bit of a stretch, because I know with the eventual departure of Datsuk, there's a scoring gap there, but that's with Blashill there, it's not the same sort of authoritarian despotism as it was with Babcock. Right. But Radulov and his personality doesn't exactly fit the Red Wings team character to a T.
So Colorado might be a good place because he can't get into a lot of trouble in Colorado.
Well,
and it's not like he's going to get arrested or anything, but we're just talking about just staying out late, those kinds of things.
It is a mile high, so yeah, but we'll see. Okay, let's touch on the 3 games tonight. We have the Islanders in Tampa tied at 1 game apiece. Tampa bounces back after a bad early performance in Game 1 to take Game 2. Russ, I think that the Islanders really have to take control and win this game. If Tampa all of a sudden gets fully confident, and I think they're the better team. I think the best player in the series is Tavares, but I think they're the better and deeper team. If Tampa Bay gets up, they may start to run away with the series.
It's possible. And, I don't know if it's gamesmanship, but there's a question as to whether Ryan Strom's playing tonight if Justin Bailey's ready. And to me, that just shows the fall of Ryan Strome in this team's eyes, because he's got 4 points in 6 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, but he's only been a factor in a handful of games. I mean, that's really the reality, right? I mean, have you thought that he's had a great playoff run so far?
He had one really impressive game in the Florida series where I think he scored. He at least had his goal, and I think he had an assist in the game. And other than that, I really haven't noticed him that much. Again,
he's 22. It's not like he's an old, it's not like he's an older guy where I'm going to really pick on him, because at 22, there's obviously still a lot of room for improvement. But, here's the reality. Shane Prince is basically stealing his job.
Yeah. Shane Prince is playing well, and if you're, because Strom's an RFA at the end of the year, and they have Hosang, Del Cole, and Barzal in the pipeline. One of them may be ready to play next year in the NHL. So
Ryan Strome could be a guy that gets dangled at the end of the season. It wouldn't shock me. Here's the thing, too. Shane Prince is not playing like a superstar, but he's got 3 goals. And he had that one important 2-goal game. He's played 8 games. He only has 3 goals. Ryan Strome has more points. But the Islanders, what they're basically sort of sending the message is, hey, this kid's scoring at big times, and Ryan Strome, you're not. You're sort of being a passenger. You're not being more than that, and we expect you to be more than that. He still might play tonight. This could be total gamesmanship. Yeah. But he has gotten scratched this year, and this is a red flag. If you're Ryan Strome, you got to be worried a little bit, because, again, Shane Prince is there now, and that is a guy who definitely could steal a job. Mm-hmm. And Strome didn't have a great season. He just didn't. So I kind of wonder. I think you're right, though. I think Tampa is starting to figure it out, and we have talked about it. I mean, if I told you Ryan Strome had 28 points this year, would that surprise you?
Yeah. And I know he got sent to the minors in
71 games, though. 71 games.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who was picked 5th overall. I mean, he's a talented offensive player. But, I mean, the concern was, I remember when he got sent down, I think he said something to the effect of, I need to be kicked in the pants every once in a while. It's like, well, I just don't know whether it's going to work with him, with Capuano, or work with him in Brooklyn. It just, right. I thought there was much more talent there, and maybe it's time that he needs a change of scenery. And with him being an RFA, it may be a situation where they can move him and get something that can help him in another area. Maybe they can get a defenseman, because they still say that they're going to have to trade Hamonic.
Now Bailey adds that experience and that grease and good on draws and some of the other things that he can do. So it probably does make it a tougher game if Bailey's in there over Strome right now. That probably does tilt things a little bit more towards the Islanders, and Pulock definitely tilts it more towards the Islanders if he gets in there. I don't know if he's in there or not. I don't know if you've seen if he's in there or not yet.
I haven't. I know that for Tampa, Stroman took an optional skate. He's still, I believe it's a non-weight bearing bone in his leg. Yeah. And so, I mean, he could get in there eventually. I don't know if it's going to be this series, but he's getting closer.
Here, I'm going to tell you something about the non-weight bearing thing too, because someone in my family had a non-weight bearing ankle injury, right? And you're able to walk around with it. It's very painful. And so when we just casually talk about non-weight bearing injuries, like, hey, it's not that serious, he might get back. These guys are in a lot of pain and blocking out a lot of pain just to get back. I mean, it's not as serious as a regular break. And doctors will look at it and say, well, that's the best case scenario that just happened to you.
Right.
But it's still pretty painful.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to switch places with them. Game 3 of the Stars and Blues moves to St. Louis. Dallas played very well in Game 1, got the victory. Kari Lehtinen played great in that game and then gave up 3 in the first period in game 2 and got pulled.
Who's in net?
I would assume it's going to be Niemi. If they go back to
Latin, we don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure. And this is the thing.
Is that bad for a team that they don't know for sure?
Again, it's like if you have 2 goalies, you have none. And they keep the only team that I can think of that has won a Stanley Cup with this kind of situation was Carolina in 2006. And they eventually opted for Ward and went with Ward the rest of the way.
Yeah.
At one point, and I actually agree with what X said a couple days ago. Make your decision and stick with the guy.
Yeah.
Stick with Niemi or stick with Latin.
I think you're right.
But Brian Elliott did not exactly instill any confidence. I'm open to Brian Elliott being better than he actually is, but he didn't prove anything to me in game 2. Because Dallas was down, they came back, they tied up the game. I didn't think he was particularly strong, and it was only because Dallas took 2 penalties in overtime and gave up a David Backes power play goal that they're tied in the series. So
now, has Patrick Sharp lost a little bit of his magic without Seguin being there by his side? It seems that way.
Well, and you're hearing nothing about Seguin coming back.
Right.
Which either indicates that he's out for the season and they're just using him as a distraction, using him as a decoy, or I don't know. It's bizarre. I don't get why they brought him back.
Is Nichushkin going to be another healthy scratch?
Yeah, and then there's another one. This is a kid who scored 34 points as a rookie 3 years ago. Had an injury, had a serious hip injury, came back this year. I believe he only scored 9. And he's a big, talented winger, and he is not being utilized. And I've heard talk about him he's an RFA at the end of this year. I've heard hints about him being so disenchanted with what's going on in Dallas that he would go to the KHL, which I think means they may move him someplace where he does get a chance.
Yeah, and I hope that's what happens if that's the way it's going to roll, because he's a very talented kid and he deserves to have a role, get a chance in that role, understand what it is, and get good communication, because it seems like the communication hasn't been good with him, or at least that's what we're hearing. So, I feel bad in that regard. Now, they're doing well, so it's going to get, smeared over. Nobody's really going to care about it for as long as Dallas is winning. It gets covered over. Sharp's only got 4 points in 8 games. Patrick Sharp needs to pick it up without Tyler Seguin. They paid him a lot of money, and so this to me is a big game for him. He's supposed to be a clutch player. He's got 3 goals already. He's got to get more. They just need more out of him. Jamie Benn's leading them in scoring. Well, I don't know if he's leading them in playoff scoring, but Jamie Benn could pick it up a little bit too. He could. These are guys. Look, Hemsky, he's almost like a dead spot, but at least he got one important goal.
Yeah, that's true. Last series, San Jose.
Ben, by the way, Ben's got 12 points, so he is doing his part. Yeah. He is. Now let's see what Alex Hemsky has, because again, he's just a guy that.
I believe he has 4 points. I think he has 4.
Yeah, he has 4 points. Maybe they'll get another game out of Hemsky. They need to do that. This is, you don't want to say it, but this is a must-win game for them. It is. Yeah, if they don't win this game, the series gets away from them, I think.
I picked St. Louis in this series because of the goaltending, because of the defensive concerns. The thing is, Dallas scored enough goals in the last game to win. They just didn't get the goaltending.
They did, but they've got to push the pace. Remember when they pushed the pace early on against St. Louis, guys were heaving over there. They weren't enjoying that. They need to do that again. They need to run a track meet.
And Antoine Roussel has got to stop taking stupid penalties. I almost called him Dominic Roussel. Remember the old goalie? Yeah. Last series,
Flyers fans are happy that you did that. I'm sure.
There you go. I'm sure. San Jose leads Nashville 2-0 after 2 home wins. They go to Nashville for Game 3. Russ, I think San Jose wins one of the 2 games in Nashville. The series is done, and I know that you observed that Pekka Rinne is not looking like Pekka Rinne.
I don't think he is. I understand that everybody's got that gif of him making the double leg save, but on that play, there was a goal scored, right? And maybe this is just me, but from what I've seen of Rinne, he looks a little slower post to post. Mm-hmm. And maybe San Jose knows that. And so if I'm if I'm Nashville, I've got to tighten up more defensively, right? Because it's not like they're ever bringing in Carter Hutton. Carter Hutton will see 0 playoff minutes unless Pekka Rinne is knocked out on the ice. It's no offense. That's just reality.
I think Eck would have a stroke if Carter Hutton came in.
But this is it. I mean, this is the absolute back against the wall. You've got to put everything into this game. You've got to play this game like this is your elimination game if you're Nashville. And if you can't seem to get that going the right way, then, yeah, San Jose is just going to steamroll them. And this is a weird series, right? Because this is the series where everybody just sort of threw up their hands like, well, I don't know. I can't pick San Jose because they never do it, and I can't pick Nashville because they never do it. But somebody's going to do it in this series.
I've overused the analogy. This is the battle of the chokers. This is the teams that never win. They won. So now it's uncertain territory. Okay, who's going to win? Well, neither one of them have ever won. So how the hell are we supposed to know? I would expect Shea Weber to try to
be very physical and play on the
physical, exert his will, get the crowd into this game. Guys like James Neal, probably cheap shot a few people. We'll see things of that nature in Nashville. They'll try to get back in the series. If they make it 2-1, I think we got a series. But I think if San Jose wins either one of those games in Nashville, I think it goes back to San Jose and they close it out. So we'll see.
I mean, here's the thing, okay? I don't know how much money James Neal's getting paid, but he does need to step up. He's got 3 points in 9 games. Like, it's gotten him this far, but he needs to have a big game. He can't continue to just be that guy that just is hard to play against but not scoring anymore. He had a great regular season, like a comeback season with 66 points, and he had 27 goals, and now he's got 2 goals in 9 games. They've signed him to score goals.
Yeah, no, and I mean Nashville has gotten performances out of Colin Wilson, Craig Smith, and that's the thing. If you get those guys, Colin Wilson's got 7 points. He's leading the team. Johansson's got 6 points. Roman Josi.
Yeah. How's this possible? How does Ryan Johansson have 6 points and 3 goals more than James Neal? And James Neal, nobody talks about James Neal because he's physical. Yet Johansson's doing pretty good.
3 of the top 5 Nashville Predators scorers are defensemen.
Yeah.
Josi, Weber, and Ekholm. So,
I
mean, for all the talk, well, their offense has improved because they got Johansson. Johansson's doing it. Nobody else is doing it.
Right.
All right. Great show, Russ. We'll have Eck back tomorrow. We'll have Jillian Fisher back tomorrow. And us, the 2 ugly old guys.
Wait, are we going to say anything about the soccer team winning? We should.
No, we'll save it for tomorrow. We'll save it for
tomorrow. That for tomorrow? Okay.
Because we want to get into an argument about how meaningless the English Premier Soccer League championship is.
Okay. I'll hold my tongue till tomorrow.
Yes. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.